Presse Play. Was in Alpbach wichtig wird.
Ich erkenne meinen Alpbach nicht wieder. Wir probieren neu etwas aus.
Der Presse-Podcast aus Alpbach wird unterstützt von der Erste Group.
Hello and welcome to our podcast from Alpbach. My name is Anna Weiner and this is a little premiere for us. For the first time, we will record a live podcast and I'm a little bit nervous to be honest, but mainly very delighted that so many of you came to join us today. Hallo und herzlich willkommen bei unserem Podcast aus Alpbach. Mein Name ist Anna Weiner und das ist eine kleine Premiere für unser gesamtes Audioteam. Denn zum ersten Mal senden wir vor Publikum live und werden dann im Anschluss die Aufnahme wie gewohnt am Samstag in unserem Podcast-Kanal aus Alpbach ausstrahlen. Ich freue mich wirklich sehr, dass auch so viele jetzt hier bei uns sind und uns live zuhören. Die Idee zu diesem Podcast ist uns erst vor einigen Wochen gekommen. Sie war damals noch recht vage, weil wir wussten ja nicht genau, wer in diesem Sommer überhaupt nach Alpbach kommen wird, welche Gäste beim Forum teilnehmen werden. Und deswegen war dann irgendwie auch ein Teil der Idee, dass wir uns gesagt haben, wir werden einfach auf uns zukommen lassen, welche GesprächspartnerInnen uns dieses Forum vor die Mikros spülen wird. Und tatsächlich war es dann so, dass ich meinen beiden Gästen, Kurinna und Valeriya Izhyk, im Lauf der vergangenen Tage erst zum ersten Mal begegnet bin und sie sprechen gehört habe über ihre Geschichte und sofort von ihrer Kraft und Eloquenz beeindruckt war. Also habe ich sie gefragt, ob sie meine Gäste sein wollen und sie wollten und ich glaube, das ist das, von dem so viele sagen, es ist der Spirit von Alpbach. Maria und Valeriya sind zwei von insgesamt 31 Stipendiatinnen, die dieses Jahr in Alpbach sind. Und das ist deswegen wichtig zu sagen, weil man auch daran schon sieht, dass in der Ukraine Krieg ist. Denn die männlichen Stipendiaten, die mussten in diesem Jahr zu Hause bleiben, denn sie müssen im Krieg dienen und können ihr Land nicht verlassen. Wir werden jetzt 45 Minuten miteinander sprechen. Maria und Valeriya werden ihre Geschichte erzählen, wir werden über ihren Krieg in ihrem Heimatland sprechen und wir führen den Rest des Gesprächs auf Englisch. Dear Maria and dear Valeriya, thank you again for your time and willingness to do this live podcast with us. I'm very thankful you said yes. And I believe it reflects the spirit of Alpbach quite perfectly that we just met 3 days ago and when I listened to your speeches on the Independence Day of Ukraine on the 24th of August and then we decided together that it would be a good idea to do this live podcast together. We will start with a brief introduction of you and will then continue with your view on the Russian war against your country and how you perceive Austria's role in this. Maria, I would like to start with you. You are originally from the Lugansk region in eastern Ukraine. You were born in 1987 on the last day. When Ukraine became independent on the 24th of August 1991, you were 4 years old. Where do you live today and what is your profession?
Thank you very much for everyone, and it's an honor for us always when guests come in. And thank you very much, Anna Maria, as well, for giving us a platform. And also, I would like to use this chance to express my gratitude to Forum for Ukrainians to be here, to be present in quite a good representation. And talking about me, my name is Kurinna, this is true. I was born in Lugansk, eastern Ukraine. I live now in between Ukraine and Poland because of my profession. I have to travel a lot to advocate for Ukraine. I'm a former diplomat and I'm human rights defender, Ukrainian human rights defender. So now I'm working on accountability mechanisms to bring perpetrators to justice on tribunals and other mechanisms.
Okay, thank you, Valeriya. You were born in 1994, which means you grew up in an already independent Ukraine. Please tell us your story.
So I was born in independent Ukraine. Because I decided to become a historian, I learned what was Soviet Union, I never knew it I never experienced it on my skin. But when I was 19 years old, and it was my second year of bachelor degree in history in Kiev Mahila Academy, the Revolution of Dignity started, and I realized that I'll probably have to change my specialization because it's not time to talk about what happened. It's actually now a historic moment, and we all need to somehow contribute to that. So I decided to become a civil servant. I became the youngest civil servant in Ukraine. I was 23 years old. It was a position in the Directorate General for Strategic Planning and European Integration in the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine. I was state expert on European integration and international relations. I was originally born in Sumy, that is also, unfortunately, on the border with Russia, and luckily, it escaped this first wave of invasion in 2014. That's why I had privilege to come back to my native town and to see my granny, to speak to my friends from the childhood. And when I turned 10 years old, I moved to Kiev. But the interesting story is that now when I see how, for instance, Kharkiv struggling, you might all saw these pictures and this video how the missiles struck the administrative building in Kharkiv. There was a huge explosion, and there is still this rocket in the asphalt on the main square of Kharkiv. And I remember I was only once in Kharkiv because my mom used to be the first director of McDonald's in 1997 when the first McDonald's was opened in 1997 in Kharkiv. You can imagine I was kind of a cool kid. My mom was director of McDonald's. I have only nice memories from Kharkiv, eating my first Happy Meal. And now when I see how Kharkiv is struggling and how many people lost their houses, for me it's in my bucket list. The first thing that I will do when we win is to go back to Kharkiv and have my Happy Meal there.
The president of the Forum, Andreas Streichel, said in his opening speech this week, of the opening speech of the Forum, we have war in Europe. And Valeriya, I know that you were not quite satisfied with these words. Why?
Yeah, generally speaking, it was a very good speech. It was beautiful. I think it kept morale of people who participated in the opening ceremony high. But whenever I hear that there is war in Europe without specifying who is responsible and on which land it's happening, it kind of steals from the narrative. It steals from the truth, and that must be fixed, especially when we talk about political decision makers, about people who lead the narrative about Russian invasion in Ukraine, who shape the narrative, who help to keep us all together in this fight, because you all know that European Union is not homogeneous, it's very heterogeneous, right? In what every member state thinks is European Union and how we all need to move forward with this beautiful project. So for me, words do matter, especially in journalism now, when we sometimes, especially Maria, because she's a diplomat, and for her, words it's not only about nice talking points, it's actually about international law and our position on international platforms. It's not crisis in Ukraine. It's not Ukrainian war, because we didn't start it, we didn't want it, it doesn't belong to us. Ukrainians were always fighters, but when it comes to fighting for our own independence, it's not situation in Ukraine that's just offensive, because what is this kind of situation, right? When you have missiles hitting your residential building. it's Russian war on Ukraine. Moreover, it's Russian full-scale war on Ukraine, because when we say Russian war on Ukraine, we forget that people like Maria are struggling with that already for 8 years. So we basically exclude from the narrative the whole region. And I would like also Maria to add from the legal perspective about wording, because she, while I'm working on the energy front line, she works on the diplomatic front line, and she needs to basically repeat it as like mantra all the time.
Before I give you the word, just one sentence to that, because I think that's very important, because you said journalists. It's also something that I experience in my profession, that also in Austrian newspapers, like also I have to be very honest with you, die Presse, we often write the Ukraine Krieg, because it's shorter, you get it better in the title line and things like that. So it's a good reminder to think about that and to change that in the future. Maria, please.
Thank you. It's important to understand that this is first war in European continent since the Second World War, according to the international humanitarian law, because one country, one state, invaded the other state. There wasn't such case after the Second World War in the history, and this is really important to call Russia's war against Ukraine the war, like Valeriya said, because when we say crisis or conflict or military operation, which is Putin's and Russian propaganda narrative, we don't show the role of Russia. We don't talk that Russia waged this war. It was unjustified and unprovoked. For all of our 31 years of independence, we have never ever attacked anyone, Ukraine. So we always ask, I think at the end of March, our media workers and journalists, they posted an open letter asking media outlets who cover Russia's war against Ukraine to bear in mind that wording matters. And we provided fact-checking which notions are based on facts and which phrases are Russian narrative that international media uses and subconsciously support propaganda. And we understand that this is just misunderstanding, this is lack of knowledge. It's not about doing it on purpose, but we send it to the all biggest outlets. We were talking to journalists because every day we receive 2-3 requests to talk to media. So we started to do this campaign. We don't have investments like Russia to invest in this communication. We do it with what we have, with our resources. And also important to remember when we say Ukraine's war, it drags into the connotation that Ukraine is guilty on some war. But we woke up from bombarding at 5 a.m. in the morning, and we didn't expect that. The majority didn't. I did, unfortunately. But when we say Ukraine's war, it's everybody's tired, Ukraine has war, okay, it's for 6 months, but it's Russia's war.
Maria, I think it's important that the people realize that you still live in Kiev, but you also travel a lot to Poland. Maybe you can tell us how your life in Kiev is right now.
I'm actually, when people ask me where I'm based, it's really difficult to answer because I have new home which I was consciously building in Kiev. Then when full-scale invasion started, we received information that all public activists who were telling the truth about Russia's war for 8 years in public platforms are in the lists, and they can be executed if there is occupation of Kiev. And I couldn't, face this reality that I have to leave my second home for the second time in 8 years, and I'm already a bit older, so I was building my life and career in Kiev. And Kiev is very diverse, and I have a lot of people there supporting my ideas. So when my colleague, they just started to asking me, please, we have to evacuate, and it's not safe now for us. So when I was evacuating, I opened Facebook because I faced this reality, I'm leaving now, and I didn't want to, to think about this. I opened Facebook and I saw the little post of a very prominent human rights defender, which is a friend of mine, Konstantin Reutsky, who was one of the founders of Euromaidan in Lugansk, and also human rights defender for 25 years, supporting not only people in Ukraine but in Belarus as well when crisis started. And he was in full military form, and it was just one phrase: guys, let us go until the end and win. This is existential war for us, and we cannot stand it forever. We now will go to the end to win. And when I saw it's a human rights defender who was promoting nonviolent communication all his life in Eastern Ukraine, combating hate speech, I realized if all these guys go into Irpin to defend Kiev, then we will win.
Yep. And what did you do then?
I had to relocate. No, I had to relocate because I'm not trained to be military. And we had this meeting with other partners, listening, talking, what shall we do? What is our response? And we started to realize, every one of us has some, power, superpower, some skill, and we have to concentrate on our skill that can help Ukraine win. My field is diplomatic and international relations field. And also we started from basements. When we were staying, it was a lot of bombarding, air raids, alarms, and we started to work from in Kiev from shelters, journalists from Japan were calling, and we established the coalition, which is called Ukraine 5 a.m. coalition, from the second day of invasion, together with about 30 human rights organizations, Ukrainian, that have expertise in documenting war crimes and crimes against humanity. And we were thinking what name is better. So we decided Ukraine 5 a.m., not only because all Ukraine woke up from bombardments, but also it correlates to Crimea, where all the story started, the occupation started. And all these 8 years, Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, indigenous people of Crimea, were woken up by illegal searches of so-called policemen of Russian occupying power, just because they are Ukrainians or Crimean Tatars, just because they were not agree with occupation, and they were peaceful protesters sometimes. So, and also this 5 a.m., it's a wake-up call not only for Ukraine, it's a wake-up call for all Europe.
What I think it's very interesting that you both met in Alpbach the first time. You were 7 years apart, but you both share a story with the engagement in the Revolution of Dignity. Maybe we can talk about that a bit. That started in late 2013 in Kiev, and you both have different views on it, and you joined the revolution also in different cities. Maria in Lugansk, you in Kiev. Valeriya, tell me what was your why did you join the revolution, and why was it so important for you personally?
Well, I just turned 19 years old on 20th of November, and then next day we had this first big student strike on the streets of Kiev, because we realized that back then our president, Mr. Yanukovych, decided not to sign association agreement with the European Union. For young people like me who were born in independent Ukraine, it meant sliding back into the past and being part of Ruski Mir, that is Russian world. And I didn't feel like that because I saw human rights violation in Russia. I very well knew the history of Soviet Union and of imperialistic war of Russia back then already. And I realized that I do believe that Ukraine is part of the European world, that we share the same values. It's respect to human rights, it's rule of law, it's right for self-expression, no matter what is your religion, no matter what is your sex, no matter what is your social background. We're all sharing one dignity, to be human and to respect each other. And I realized that if our president made a decision not to sign this agreement, it means that there will be no life like I expected to be in my country anymore. So being very young historian, I went to the streets and we shouted all this, Ukraine is Europe, until we were until the moment, the night, I very well remembered when we were heavily beaten, especially our guys from our group, because they were trying to hide us under their bodies, basically. And after that, I remember my parents said that I'm not going to live in the country where my kid can be just beaten by police. And then the question, what kind of police do we have in our country if they think that they can just, raise their arm and violate my personal space and personal space of young citizens. So this is how it all changed, and we barely graduated in 2016 because we all missed a lot of classes, as you can imagine, and we quarreled a lot with our professors because they said, you guys either build your country or you study. And we said, well, kind of the choice is very easy. Yeah, it's easy, it's obvious. So yeah, and this is how I write. Where I write when public administration reform started. I joined Ministry of Education because I realized that we need to keep these values in our education system. That's the only way how you can actually build the whole social structures that facilitate this rule of law and respect to human rights. But I was really impressed when I realized that I live with Maria, and I've heard a lot about her because she was one of those few who got into diplomacy. Everyone wants to get in diplomacy, right? And so I was lucky to have Maria.
And Maria didn't tell us so far that you have a special connection to Japan. Maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, I can actually tell it's interrelated to all this story. For me, Euromaidan, the Revolution of Dignity, was the second revolution. Orange Revolution, which happened in 2004-2005, when pro-Russian powers wanted to steal elections. People went out to streets, to the main squares of their cities and in Kiev. And I was finishing high school. I was 16, 17 years old at that time. My parents were like pro-Ukrainian opposition in Lugansk. Well, and my mom actually, after the Declaration of Independence, she opened first Ukrainian school in Lugansk because we felt that all the Soviet Union legacy and Russian Empire, it was occupation. They wanted to erase our history, our identity, and our culture. So it was very like a natural decision to reconnect with our story. And when again pro-Russian powers took over, my parents' generation were already, they invested a lot, all the young years to live in European Ukraine. They were a bit tired, frankly speaking, and they didn't believe that there will be another historical shift in Ukraine. And they said, no, it's impossible. I just graduated from Japanese Institute in Saitama Prefecture in Japan, and went to work in South Africa as a translator in business when the Revolution of Dignity started. And I couldn't stay there when I saw that my colleagues from academia went out to streets, when my students went out to streets. And in South Africa, there were a lot of Russian propaganda. Like, it showed absolutely different reality, that we are all Nazi or whatever. And it's like, come on, those are my students and my colleagues. I don't believe this. So I went there. I finished my contract, which was really for 4 years, and I stayed only 6 months. And I realized I have to belong to this story, and I want to contribute. I was waiting for this all my life. I believed that we will build our own country with good future, with democratic future. That's how it happened. So I was actually commuting between Lugansk, Euromaidan, where all my friends were, and Kiev. And actually, I started to talk to my foreign friends from Japan, from India, from South America, from US, telling the truth, because it was all Russian media, and they were telling perverted reality. And just because my friend knew me personally, they said, if we didn't know you, we wouldn't believe. But because you tell this you see it by your own eyes, you're an eyewitness, you participate, and we believe that this is propaganda telling us different things.
You talked about so many countries now, India and other countries. When we talked before this recording, we also talked about how countries in the world react on the Russian war in Ukraine right now. So I would like to ask you how you perceive Austria's role in this war.
So first of all, I think that it's really important to distinguish between people of Austria and Austrian government, because we were deeply touched by the way people behaved when Ukrainians tried to flee Ukraine, and they were looking for shelter, and people opened their houses, provided all support they could. And that was really, this is something that we are fighting for, because this is the level of solidarity that we all want to see in our daily lives, I hope. But then, of course, being a historian, being diplomat, we all understand the different legacy of European member states and their different diplomatic narratives. And knowing that Austria is traditionally neutral, promoting dialogue, we were not surprised by listening to the official speeches by the Chancellor, by Austrian MEPs in the European Parliament. But what strikes me still now is that even if your official diplomatic narrative is to be neutral, you still understand that if there is a talk between democratic and authoritarian regime, you cannot expect understanding between them. So, for instance, if two democratic countries face some sort of crisis, they still apply the same tools in negotiating and in solving the problem. But while you as democracy try to solve some problem with authoritarian regime, international law, respect of human rights don't work in this sort of situation. And that's why whenever we still hear about dialogue, that so far didn't lead to anywhere. So people are still people are dying as we speak. We need to understand that. It looks like hypocrisy at this point, after Bucha, after Irpin, to talk about dialogue. Dialogue is not effective anymore especially with a country that disregarded international law and uses dialogue and all economic ties to blackmail in energy sector, in food sector, in agricultural sector. Maybe Maria will add more, but so far this is how it's perceived by most of Ukrainians. I think we can really generalize in this case, while we can really speak from our personal point of view in other cases.
Yeah, I would like to elaborate a little bit. It is also I would like to give a credit to our diplomats, Ukrainian diplomats who have been fighting all these years. When I joined them, they already said that from 2014 we felt like we are fighting, but in a diplomatic front line, trying to explain what is going on, trying to combat propaganda with very limited means, and even on different levels, we still were contributing to dialogue. We had this mechanism. We were negotiating on the state level. And what it brought, it's full-scale invasion with more than 10 million of people fleeing from Ukraine. It's 1/4 of Ukrainian population. And at that moment, in terms of rules of diplomacy, of course, one day we will have to negotiate when the military phase is over. But if you negotiate, you have to negotiate from the strong position. If we negotiate now, when some international partners start this a bit dangerous narrative, if we negotiate now from weak position, then we know what will happen. Russia will ask us to give away our territories. And now 20% of Ukraine is occupied. It's the population which is more than Austrian population. And what it means that situations like in Irpin and Bucha and my region, Lugansk and Donetsk region, will be going on there. Now we have so-called filtration measures from Russian side for people who would like to leave the occupied region. So if we give away territories now, it's not about territories even. It's not about even our even international law. It's about human beings. It's about Ukrainians who are waiting there for us, and it means we will let them down with the regime who will torture them, who will threaten them, who will rape them. And we will never do it, and it's official position from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from state, and we are all together, civil society.
But I think that's the point of view that from the Ukrainian side, it's totally understandable. But the question is, if it is not at least a good idea to try it, as also Federal Chancellor Nehammer said also here in Alpbach on Monday, to try to stay on this level of dialogue. But as I listen to you, I have the feeling you say no. There's no point of traveling to Russia and talk to Putin.
It can be situational dialogue in order to prevent, for example, food crisis, because we are not it's not our fault that Russia blocked all seaports, and Ukraine, which is a grain basket for the world, for Europe, one of the biggest exporter of grain and fertilizers, is not able now to export. It can be some situational negotiations in order to help other countries not to feel this level of crisis. But in terms of our sovereignty and in terms of lives of our people, it's not the good timing yet.
If I just can add one more thing, we are all up for negotiations and dialogue, but it must not be the only tool in communication with Russia, because Russia doesn't understand explicitly what is dialogue in negotiations between different political entities. If you understood what I mean, It's just not the scale. The scale of war is so major at this point that dialogue doesn't seem efficient, effective anymore. Because it's a level of blackmailing at this point. It's either we sign agreement and then we bomb Odessa port next day, or we say we continue supplying gas through Nord Stream 1, and then next day we say that there are maintenance work that were not mentioned before. So dialogue is a valid tool when both parties believe in dialogue as a measure. Exactly, when both parties mean the same.
We often hear in the last couple of days and weeks of a word that's called war fatigue. Also here, one of our ministers said that we have to face that Austrians might be a bit tired of the war. The German chancellor said that just a couple of days. That must be very hard for you, I guess, to hear that people in Europe get tired of the war that is going up in your country. What do you think about that?
I think it's natural. Of course, people can get tired, and it's very difficult information to perceive all the time. It's about human nature. We also get tired sometimes, but we have no choice. We will win, so we have to work on this. And the reason why we understand it, because we are in this for some time. Important thing for us is still talk about people stories, that this war is not about our ambitions or anything. We just want our future back. We want our lives back. We want our country again to be livable place, because according to survey, 80% of Ukrainian refugees, those who fled, want to go back to Ukraine, want to build Ukraine back better. So we just would like to still tell the stories, because these stories are not about misery. Ukrainians actually empower me a lot not to feel tired, because people which I have met during the 6 months, Ukrainians whom I somehow didn't know before, they really empower me every other day. For example, when I have to travel, I go to Warsaw, and it's a long trip. But I stay in a house where a lot of Ukrainian anti-corruption activists, women with kids, live in, and they do incredible things. When you talk to them, they are amazing. They were coming to Washington, every 2 weeks, explaining why we have to win, why we will be winners. They were visiting every capital in Europe a couple of times before we actually achieved EU association agreement. When we started to talk about this in early March, big players in Europe said, you will never ever have EU candidacy status in June. It is impossible. And we had to explain that it's not a present for us. We have been reforming our country, and civil society was pushing all main reforms, because we have democracy, and two governments had to actually reform country because it was demand of society. And we explained that this is actually a recognition of this, and we are not naive to join EU. We know that we have our home task to do, and it will take long. It will take years before membership. But I was in Berlin with my new German friends at night when this message came that we finally received it, and they opened champagne for us to celebrate. And I was so emotional, and I can't believe we've done it. So Ukrainians, I really would I'm also very heartfully thankful for everyone who supported Ukrainians, who opened their hearts, not only homes for Ukrainians. But Ukrainians are not victims. They have good education, the majority, and they can actually be an asset while they are here in Europe. They can share a lot. We have really good talented people in civil society, in IT, in business, in academia. And one day they will go back. A lot of them will go back.
A lot of them go back.
But they will be bridges. They will be bridges between our countries, because one day we will be back to European family.
Yeah, according to UN statistics, a lot of Ukraine, I don't remember that, I don't want to speculate, I don't remember the exact number, but it's more than 20% Ukrainians came back home. Yeah. So it's a very different wave of refugees, though none of us is a refugee. Yeah. Just want to be clear here. We both pay taxes in the countries we are. I pay taxes in Ukraine and in Belgium. And everyone who actually feels like they can keep on working, being abroad, but in Ukraine, right, or go and work in the countries that accepted them, they say we don't want to receive any social support because we feel like we can actually cope. And there are people who, of course, don't know English or languages of their receiving countries, and then it's just a necessity. And I think that Ukrainians generally try to be very reasonable when it comes to that.
We are almost at the end of our talk, but before we finish, I would like to ask you what we all sitting here, normal citizens of Austria, can do to help Ukraine. Also, when we talked about the dialogue thing before, I would like to ask you or give you another question, like what else is there to do instead of keeping up a dialogue?
So because I'm an energy expert and I work in Brussels, and then I work with European energy regulators, being deeply into regulation and policies, I must say that we need to decrease our energy consumption. All of you guys, we can do that. We can all fight Putin by changing our everyday energy consumption. For instance, I don't understand when we have these lights now here in this room. There is enough daylight, let's be honest, okay? There are cities, most of cities in the European Union have wonderful public transportation. Still, I see millions of cars, and I don't understand why people take car, for instance, in Brussels, when you have all sorts of public transportation, right? We need more car-free weekends. It's just nice because we don't hear this car noise, and it actually is also good for our mental health. We're all coming into a very difficult winter, and we all know that Europeans will pay 3 times bigger electricity and gas bills. Ukrainians still pay a bigger price. But I still think that some governments don't reveal the main mechanism how to decrease the level of pressure on energy consumers this winter. We have those gas companies who have extra revenues because of the high gas prices. And some governments already talk about windfall tax. That will mean that this money can be redistributed to cover energy bills in European member states, especially for vulnerable households. I think that sometimes our politicians use our lack of knowledge, especially in energy. And another thing, the war in Ukraine, the Russian war in Ukraine, it's massively about energy. And by phasing out Russian fossil fuels, we actually speed up green transition because it's a spillover effect. So I think that we all can be peace soldiers in this Russian war against Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Valeriya.
Yeah, I would elaborate how you can continue be peaceful warriors, peaceful soldiers. It's about combating disinformation and propaganda. You can tell the truth. we in my organization, Zmina Human Rights Center, Zmina means change in Ukrainian, document war crimes and crimes against humanity. We documented 300 enforced disappearances of Ukrainians since 24th of February, and this is only verified, fully verified cases. And it means that those are really hundreds. It's not about this number. It's only those we could fully verify, like because we coordinate with international organization, they have the same number. And it means like when we don't have access to occupied territories, when we have access, there will be a lot of more. What we can do, we can join the campaign which we launched in March, late March. Like in social media, you can type #TheTaken. For Russia's regime, know that the world knows every name of Ukrainian who has been taken, who has been tortured, who disappeared just because he or she is Ukrainian, for them to understand that accountability will come, tribunals will come, and for them to know that everyone in civilized world knows about these Ukrainians and their names, their stories.
Thank you very much, Maria and Valeria. It's very interesting to listen to you, and I'm sure you would have to tell us a lot more stories, but we have to look at our time now. But I would like to invite everyone who stays here. Now we can grab our lunch bags, and you two will stay here a bit longer. Yeah. If there are questions, we can continue the discussion after our recording. Thank you very much for all of you who came here. I hope that you will also listen to our podcast, even though it's right now mostly in German, so sorry for that. Danke an alle, die vor Ort waren und uns zugehört haben, auch an diejenigen, die uns hier im Podcast zuhören. Das war Folge 6 unserer kleinen Audioreihe aus Alpbach. Und wenn Ihnen dieser Podcast gefällt, dann erzählen Sie doch bitte anderen davon. Teilen Sie vielleicht Ihre Lieblingsfolge, und wenn Sie noch mehr von uns hören wollen, es gibt auch einen Daily Podcast, den wir haben, das ist auch hier zu sehen, was wichtig wird, heißt unser Podcast. Hören Sie doch da auch gern mal hinein. Noch einmal danke, thank you, machen Sie es gut und bis zum nächsten Mal.
Dankeschön. Thank you very much.
Was in Alpbach wichtig wird.